and welcome to this week's edition of the Maine Challenge. This week, I talk about what's on the ballot in November for November 2nd. We have 3 statewide ballot referendums, and then there are a multitude of candidates for local office, school boards, town councils, city councils, 1 state legislative race. But this show, we're going to talk about the 3 statewide referendums. So we go through each of the questions, 1, 2, and 3. And then I'll talk a little bit about how you actually go vote, because voting, you can start voting now. It's open now, and election day is November 2nd. And then I sound off a little bit about the wording of referendum questions. I bet you'll be with me on that one. So please have a look, stay with us, and enjoy the show. Okay, so let's talk about the statewide referendums that are on the ballot, on everybody's ballot in Maine this election on November 2nd. The first question, question number 1, is the citizen-initiated referendum on the CMP Corridor, the NECE corridor, right? It's been getting lots of press. There's lots and lots of ads on it. But let me just read you what the actual question says. It says, do you want to ban the construction of high-impact electric transmission lines in the Upper Kennebec region and to require the legislature to approve all other such projects anywhere in Maine, both retroactively to 2020 and to require the legislature retroactively to 2014 to approve by a 2/3 vote such projects that use public land? Okay, so that is what it says. Do you want to ban this high-speed line? Do you want to have them go back and basically require, in order for this or any other high-speed transmission line to be enacted or to be allowed to go forward, it would require a 2/3 vote of the legislature? So the yes side, now this is very confusing. This is, first of all, this is a citizen-initiated referendum. This means that citizens had to collect upwards of 60,000, 65,000 signatures from you and me and people all across the state in order to be placed on the ballot. You may recall that they tried this before and the Supreme Court said, no, this question isn't valid. You can't put this on the ballot. So this is the replacement for that, right? And its intention is to stop CMP and its parent company and Hydro-Quebec from building a transmission line, a high voltage transmission line from Maine to Massachusetts. And the intention is very much to stop CMP from being able to do this, okay? Now, the no side obviously opposes stopping it, wants it to go ahead. They were granted permission to start in May of 2021, and they have already done so. I'm sure you've seen some of that on the commercials and that have been out already. So if you vote yes, it means you want to stop this current CMP project, and you want to make it more difficult for any future project like this that would go through the North Woods, that would do clear cutting, that would do, whatever they're doing to make sure that the transmission line goes through, that you want to stop that. If you vote no, then that means you want the project to continue as is. Now, there are bipartisan people on both sides. You probably have heard that both Janet Mills and former Governor Paul LePage are on the no side. They think that this project should go ahead, that this is and they believe that it is better energy. Hydro energy is better energy than fossil fuels. They believe it reduces carbon emissions. The people who want to stop it, the yes side who want to stop it, I know that's confusing, but the yes side that want to stop it say, no, this does not actually meet our energy needs. Maine gets nothing from this, right? This is going to Massachusetts. It is a destruction of the North Woods. It gets in the way of a lot of wildlife habitat, and it's not a good deal for Maine. So those are really the 2 sides. Now, this has become a very pitched, heated battle with, as of this show, over $71 million. $71 million has been spent to try and convince us one way or the other of how to vote. So I will say that the money it has been grossly uneven in terms of the spending. CMP and Hydro-Quebec largely have funded the no side. And that is, they've spent 55 million. And there have been natural gas companies and conservationists and environmentalists who have funded the yes side, and they have spent $16 million. So as of today, right, 55 million to 16 million, huge disparity in the money that's being spent, and an entire commentary on money in politics. I mean, yes, I can't even begin to think about, I mean, that's a whole nother show on the money in politics about this. But so far they've spent $70 per person in the state of Maine to tell us, you know, to convince us of what to do with this. Now, you have seen that the advertising has been unbelievable. There has been so many ads. And so for the no side, which means you do want the corridor to go forward, and I know that I keep saying it, but it's so confusing. But for the no side, one of the things that's interesting is that there is a lot of opposition to this corridor in all parts of the state. In the northern part of the state, especially where it's going through, the towns it's going through, there's a lot of opposition there. There's just been a lot of opposition. And I am pretty sure that CMP did polling and found out that opposing or supporting the corridor, the sort of clean energy solution, the kind of this is good for everybody kind of thing, even the $15 million that they threw in to help Maine broadband to try and sweeten the deal, people still were like saying no, So they must have done polling that said what people don't like is they don't like the process. They don't like how it's being done, like being retroactive and having the legislature have to have an input on this for, you know, with the 2/3 vote, you know, so they have really switched from talking about the issue, the actual issue, which is the corridor and energy, to really talking about the process. And so it's, to me, I don't know, you know, I'm sure that is, if they're spending that much money, it's based on very, very intense polling and seeing what works and focus groups and all that kind of stuff to see what's going to resonate with people. So you even see the signs along the road that say no retroactive laws, no retroactive legislation. So it really says nothing about the corridor. So if you didn't know any better and you were a Martian who landed now and you were reading just the signs, you would think yes to stop the corridor and no to stop 2/3 legislation, retroactive legislation, nothing about the corridor. Because the clean energy corridor signs that they had early on, the green signs, remember, those are pretty much disappeared and they're not putting more of those out. It is really focusing on the process. So in a way, they're really trying us to focus us on apples versus oranges, right? And so you have to be clear that this is really a vote on the CMP corridor. Now, there are people who might not like how the referendum is written or what it actually does or what it gives the legislature to do, and that's valid. You know, that's definitely part of this. But it really takes away from the actual issue, which is, should there be a corridor built? Is hydropower from Quebec, right? Is hydropower from Quebec going to Massachusetts a good thing in general, a good thing for Maine? Those are the things we have to decide. Now, both sides have had canvassers out. I've had both sides come to my door. You probably have them come to your door as well. And they are, you know, trying to, again, convince us. I've gotten a lot of mailings. You know, $55 million is a lot of money to spend. And unfortunately, these off-year elections are pretty low turnout. So we're really not talking about 1 million people turning out to vote. You know, maybe 300,000 people will vote in this election, and that's a high estimate probably. And so imagine the amount of money that's being spent. So again, I encourage you to go to the website. You can go to Ballotpedia, which is actually a really good source, and just type in question 1 in Maine, and it'll tell you, what the issue is. It will give you the summary. It gives you access to the actual law that it reflects. It also tells you how much money's been spent, who spent that money, you know, all of that. So it's a really good resource. Take a look at it and then decide, but make sure that you have your voice heard. Now, at the end of this show, in my sound off, I sound off about referendum questions being deceiving and being hard to follow, right? So it's crazy because if you want to stop something, you vote no. And if you want to support something, you vote yes. But on question 1, it is exactly the opposite, right? So if you want to stop the CMP corridor, you will be voting yes, because the language says, do you want to ban? And so the answer is yes, I want to ban. If you are in favor of the corridor and the high transmission line, then you are voting no, because the question is, do you want to ban? And so you'll be voting no. It's very counterintuitive to me. It really is confusing. And if you watch to the end and see my sound off, you will see me saying, this is crazy. We've got to do better. We've got to figure out how to do this better. But in the meantime, know that that's what you're voting on. Again, huge amounts of money being spent. CMP, again, is owned by a foreign corporation. And that is where the money is coming from to fund this campaign, as well as Hydro-Quebec. So 2 foreign entities are funding this pretty much. And then on the other side, they have some natural gas folks and some other energy providers who obviously are not hydro providers, who are funding it, as well as conservationists and environmentalists and other folks who are opposing the building of the corridor. So this is a really important piece. I think one of the pieces that hasn't been talked about too much is, like, what do we see as our energy future? Do we see natural gas? Do we see hydropower? Do we see fossil fuels? Or do we see real alternatives? And there is some effort now in the, no, NIMBY, not in my backyard, is yes in my backyard. And to really try and regionalize and keep more local energy production. And in our next show on Maine Challenge, we will be talking about that, about energy production and should we own CMP, our power. But this is really not about that. This is about, should we build the corridor or not? So that's what you have to decide. Please go to Ballotpedia, go to some sources, and don't just watch the ads on TV, because they're very misleading. And so, both sides are really trying to ratchet up what works in the polls. Remember that it's counterintuitive. If you want it to stop, you vote yes. If you want it to go, you vote no. But remember those things, find the information, and then decide, and then make sure you go and have your voice heard on this really important issue about Maine woods, about our energy future, and about how you see it. That's question 1. Now we'll move on to question 2. So let's talk about question number 2. Question number 2 is a bond issue. So bond issues are basically the state borrowing money, and it's borrowing money by people investing in them, and to leverage other money to do mostly infrastructure and capital improvements. Okay, so there was only one bond issue this year. Often there's many, but this year there's only one. And I'm going to read you the exact wording of the question. Do you favor a $100 million bond issue to build or improve roads, bridges, railroads, airports, transit facilities, and ports, and make other transportation investments to be used as leverage, to leverage an estimated $253 million in federal and other funds? So this is a Maine bond that will be $100 million. It will leverage $253 million in other funding. So we're talking about $353 million that are going to be invested in fixing Maine's roads and bridges. Now, about 85% of that money is going to go actually to roads and bridges, and the other 15% is going to go to air, rail, or airport, other kinds of ports, other kinds of transit and transportation issues and carriers. So that is what this is about. There has not been much work either way. I mean, I shouldn't say much work. There hasn't been much advertising. There hasn't been much going on either side, either pro or con. Most people believe, and historically in Maine, that making these kind of investments is a good thing. It creates jobs. It creates better roads. And if you've been driving around Maine at all, you know that we need some help with our roads. And so it's a very, very straightforward bond issue. The way bond issues get on the ballot is the legislature has to have a hearing about them, and then 2/3 of the Senate and 2/3 of the House have to agree to put it out on. So this is a bipartisan measure that says, yes, we need this kind of investment. And it's really almost a 2-to-1, 2.5-to-1 match from other funds, from federal funding and other sources, that is going to really grow this $100 million. So that is what the bond issue does. Again, pretty straightforward, comes from the legislature. They're the ones who put it on the ballot. And that's question number 2. Okay, so question number 3 is all about a constitutional right to food. So this is a constitutional amendment that has to go on the ballot in order to be approved. And so let me just read you what the question says, okay? Question 3 says, do you favor amending the Constitution of Maine to declare that all individuals have a natural, inherent, unalienable right to grow, raise, harvest, produce, and consume the food of their own choosing for their own nourishment, sustenance, bodily health, and well-being? Now, this one is a little more straightforward. You either say, yes, you believe there's a right to food, or no, there isn't. So it creates a right to food, meaning that you can have seeds and seed exchanges, and you consume the food that you grow, and it protects against abuses of theft or trespassing or somebody taking the food that you're growing or hunting or eating or whatever. So this bill, it has bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats who are supporting this bill. And there really isn't a lot of campaigning around this. There hasn't, certainly not the kind of thing that we're seeing on question 1. And so so this grows out of the food security movement, food sovereignty movement that started in 2017, which allowed localities, local towns and cities to have food sovereignty ordinances that basically allowed a direct producer to consumer food consumption. So think your local farmer's market, or the person who raises chickens and sells the chickens once they slaughter them, or sells those eggs, without having to go through the state rigmarole or federal rigmarole, right? So that passed in 2017, and many towns across the state have passed these local food ordinances to make sure that what's happening at farmers markets, et cetera, is fine and legal and all of that kind of stuff. So this grows out of that, and it really allows, again, it's the first one in the nation to have a constitutional amendment with a right to food. Now, the proponents of this bill are small farmers, they're organic growers, a lot of farmers markets. And again, as I said, it's bipartisan support. The opponents, interestingly, are the Humane Society and the Veterinarian Association are the major ones. And they're concerned that this will somehow allow there to be abuse of livestock and beef cattle and chickens and that kind of stuff, which of course is exactly the opposite of what the small farmers are trying to do. That really the small farmers are trying to fight big agriculture, like big pharmaceutical companies, but big agriculture from controlling our food production and who gets it, and keep food production as close and consumption as close to the source as they can. So, but there is some concern. As I said, there's not very much money being spent on this either way, one way or the other. But those are the two opponents. Supporters include, as I said, farmers, growers, Republicans, Democrats. And so this is really a pretty straightforward, do you support a right to food? Do you support small farmers? Do you support the right of us to buy our food, going to a farm and buying our yogurt or our milk or our chicken or our eggs or our beef or what pork, whatever it is. And if you do, then you vote yes on this amendment. And if you don't, if you think it should go through more stages than that, if you think that there is not a constitutional right to food and producing your food, then you vote no. This has been heightened actually during the pandemic and during thinking about what might come along for us in the future. Honestly, it's a really forward-thinking thing about sort of making sure that we can secure the right to our food production, secure the right to our food consumption without big ag or the government telling us who or what we can eat and who we can or what we can get it from. So that's really this one. Again, in order to pass the legislature to get on the ballot, the legislature put this constitutional amendment on the ballot as they have to. That's what they're required to do by law. So in order to do that, they had to pass it by 2/3 vote in the Senate and 2/3 vote in the House on the state level in Maine. And then they put it on the ballot, and then we have to vote for it just by a simple majority. And if we do that, it will then be part of the Declaration of Rights section of the Maine Constitution. Now, it's a really exciting big deal to amend the Constitution. And this right to food certainly would be a new thing that was included in our Constitution. and gets us beyond life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but also the ability to actually live. So anyway, very interesting, very important. Take a look. They have, you can go look up, just Google question number 3, and you can get the Ballotpedia. You can go to each of their websites and see what they're saying and what they're talking about and which way, you want to vote. But this is a constitutional amendment for the right to food. Pretty straightforward, yes or no. So let's talk about actually voting, right? The election is on November 2nd, Tuesday, and your polling places are usually open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., although you should check with your city or town to make sure. Some open a little earlier at 7, some close a little earlier at 7, some, so anyway, call your town or city and find out the exact hours if you are intending to go to the polls and vote on November 2nd. Now, if you don't want to do it on November 2nd, or you can't do it on November 2nd, you can vote right now, right now. All you have to do, there's 2 ways to do it. One is you go to your city or town office right now. You go to the clerk's office, you ask for an absentee ballot application, you stand there, you fill out the application, and then you hand it to them, then they hand you an absentee ballot, you vote right there, and you hand it back to them, done, easy peasy. It is basically Maine's version of early voting. We don't really have early voting where you can just go into a voting booth early and do it, but we do it this way. So you don't need an excuse to do it, absentee balloting. You don't need to be sick. Your mother doesn't need your help. It doesn't, doesn't do anything. Anybody can do this starting right now. A couple of days ago it started, okay? So you can go do that right now. You can also call your city clerk or your town clerk and ask them to mail you an application for an absentee ballot. They will mail you an application, and then you mail it back to them, or you drop it off to them, and they either give you or mail you back an absentee ballot. You fill that out, and you can put that in a drop box there, or you can mail that back to them. That's sort of the more traditional way of doing an absentee ballot. So that is also easy peasy. You can do it from home. You don't have to go anywhere, but you need to get started, okay? Because it ends the Thursday before November 2nd, okay? So you can go do that, or you can go on November 2nd. Now remember, Maine has same-day voter registration. So if you are not registered to vote, but you want to weigh in on these statewide referendums, you can go to your polling place, bring a utility bill, or bring something that proves that you actually live where you say you live, and you can register to vote right there. So these referendum questions are not partisan, so it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican or an unenrolled voter or independent, what we call unenrolled, you can go vote on these statewide referendums. Now in your town, it is very likely that you will also have local elections for school board or for city or town council. There's one state legislative seat that's up because someone vacated in Augusta. So there's different things that are on your local ballot. Again, you can call and ask for a sample ballot. You can call and ask, and you will find out. But these 3 referendums are statewide and will be on everybody's ballot. So democracy only works if we all participate. So we have really good voter turnout in Maine on the even years when there's a congressional race or a governor race or a presidential race. Not so much in these in-between years when we have these referendum races. So please, get out and vote on November 2nd, or go and do it early through absentee balloting. Okay, are you confused about how to vote? I mean, I don't mean confused about how you feel about an issue, but actually how you're supposed to vote to match how you feel. It is confusing. You don't know whether you should vote yes or no. Can we sound off about the wording of referendums? Let's take question 1 this year, the CMP referendum. Just in general, in life, if you're in favor of something, you vote yes. And if you're against something, you vote no, right? You with me? I mean, yes means I support and no means I don't support. But in this referendum, just like a ton of referendums in the last 10 or 20 years in Maine, if you don't want something, you vote yes. And if you do want something, you vote no. Is it me? Or is this crazy? I remember one of the referendums on gay marriage. And if you were in favor of gay marriage, you voted no. And if you were against gay marriage, you voted yes. So these groups spent tons of time and money explaining to you and me why we should vote a different way than what seemed normal to have happen, what we wanted to have happen. I mean, there has got to be a better way. Come on, Secretary of State, and those before you, and those who will come after you. Can't we make this easier? I mean, let's take question 1. Do you want the CMP to be corridor to be built and all the legal stuff that goes with it to make that happen? Then go yes. Do you want to stop the CMP corridor and don't have it, and all the legal things that have to happen? Then you vote no. It's pretty simple. But hey, I don't want to confuse you. That is not how this is going to go this November. If you don't want the CMP corridor, you vote yes. And if you do want the CMP corridor, you vote no. Next time, could we please make it a little more easy, a little more commonsensical? Can yes mean yes and no mean no? Is that so hard?